Welcome back to the ticker. We are continuing to see all three major indices pushing higher today, coming back from a three-day weekend. The Dow leading the gains, now up nearly 680 points. The S&P 500 staying above that 3,000 level, up 56, and the Nasdaq is up 84 points. We, of course, got some positive developments this morning when we saw New York Governor Andrew Cuomo ringing in the opening bell over at the New York Stock Exchange as they partially reopened their trading floor. I want to bring in Nelson Griggs now. He's the president of the Nasdaq Stock Exchange. And Nelson, I know the Nasdaq doesn't have a physical trading floor the way the New York Stock Exchange, but that, what you saw today, that certainly had to be at least a positive sign that things are moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I think in general, the way the markets have operated over the last 2 months has been a real positive step just for how we are able to conduct ourselves in any environment. So although today is another move in the right direction, it's been relatively smooth, although there's been some volatility.
How are you viewing the timeline in terms of returning to a new normal as things can be? Imagine you're juggling many different elements from what the New York Stock Exchange is, but what kind of timeline are you operating under?
Yeah, so we are, during the last 2 months, we've already done 15 IPOs. You might have seen Warner Music launch their IPO today. There'll be several more this week. We've done a lot of secondary offerings. So the one unique thing about NASDAQ is we didn't have to make any changes to our model during this time. So although I'd love to go back to work, and the fanfare around an IPO is much more vibrant when you have people at the NASDAQ market site, we're not in a rush to go back. I think we're looking at this as trying to be measured in how we go back. We've got 30 offices or in 30 countries throughout the globe. So we do see different pockets kind of operating in different time frames to get back. We just want to make sure we're doing it safely, but we're not really need to be a first mover or rush to go back.
Yeah, certainly to your point, especially given how busy you've been on the IPO front, you have been able to move things along. One thing, though, that has been missing is the big roadshow. And there's some talk among these companies about whether that model, sort of the in-person roadshow, is really necessary anymore. Things have been working online. Is that permanently changed as a result of what we've undergone over the last 2 months?
Well, we'll see. We're certainly getting plenty of test cases, and you'll see a lot more coming up. We're looking also at a lot of conferences, investor conferences that are happening online, investor meetings. We have a very large investor relations business that's happening today online. So they say it takes 90 days to form a new habit. We have many new habits being formed. So I think you will question, does it make sense to fly throughout the country to go to see investors if this is actually working out fairly well as it is today?
Let's talk about what's happening with China, specifically the question mark around the future of U.S. listed Chinese companies. I know the NASDAQ recently proposed some restrictions placed on foreign companies, essentially looking for more vetting on that front. The Senate has now passed a bill that requires foreign companies to undergo the same kind of audits that American companies do. I'm curious about the timeline of all of this. Why did the NASDAQ feel the need to move forward on this now?
Well, we have through I guess the course of time, we do have our own rules for listed companies, and we've had several throughout the last 4 or 5 years scheduled some changes to make sure they're meeting the standards we think are appropriate. But it is also an ecosystem. So there's bankers, there's accounting firms, there's the SEC. Clearly, there's some heightened tensions at the government level. But on July 9th, the SEC Chairman Clayton is going to hold a conference July 9th with the industry leaders to make sure that we are doing the right thing to protect investors. We obviously want to maintain ourselves as a global hub for growth companies come list. At the same time, we have to have the right disclosures. So I think you'll see more coming over the next handful of months.
One of the Chinese companies that's listed on the NASDAQ, Luckin Coffee, had shares halted back in April after accounting fraud revelations surfaced. How much of what played out on that front has been a wake-up call for the NASDAQ in terms of the need for increased scrutiny, especially on Chinese companies?
Yeah, I think a lot of the activities we took were already in play before that time. You don't just form these changes overnight. So we had discussions about some changes we were considering I think it was another data point that said that it was important for us to go down this path. I think it was also an impetus to have the industry get together and have this discussion on July 9th. So I think there's a handful of things that have come up that making sure investors are protected is the most important thing here, while at the same time maintaining a balance of what we can expect of companies. So, it was a data point.
And Nelson, to the point you raised, I mean, this discussion of sort of increased vetting and changing of auditing rules has been an ongoing discussion over the years. And yet we've also seen overseas, the Hong Kong exchange change their rules to try and attract some of these big listings back home as well. Are we getting closer to a reality where we see big names like a Baidu or like an Alibaba potentially say, look, with all of these tensions, it just doesn't make sense for us to be here? And if so, what is the big risk to the Nasdaq?
Yeah, I don't think we're quite at that point yet, although you are seeing a handful of these companies considered to dual list on both the markets, Hong Kong and the US. So I do feel they are a local brand in that marketplace. So I can see where that can make sense for them. But I think about Nasdaq in general, the listing revenue of Nasdaq is about 12% of our revenue. Chinese listings are about 5% of our overall listings. So while it's not a threat to Nasdaq, we certainly would like to be seen as the U.S. in general as a place for global companies to come and list. So again, a little early to make that prediction, but clearly it's a global marketplace.
Yeah, Nelson, if I could just jump in here, I had a question about the way that we've seen SPACs really catch on here in the year of 2020. I mean, direct listings had been all the rage before, but now, I mean, how does it impact your guys' business when you're thinking about the unusual spike in SPACs? I mean, DraftKings was just the most recent big name one.
Yeah, I think we're seeing it become more of an accepted vehicle. They've been around a long, long time, but I say the last 12 months, we've seen a renewed interest in SPACs, particularly of different issuers of SPACs. So there'll be a lot more competition as we've seen all these SPACs come to market to actually find an asset to acquire. But when you see a successful outcome like a DraftKings, we have more business combinations coming. We're seeing about 70% or so SPACs actually find an acquisition target, and they're very sizable deals. So if the IPO market stalls some, I think a company thinking about how they get public, there's going to be different options, whether it's an IPO, whether it's finding a SPAC to partner with. It's another vehicle, but it's been remarkable.
Obviously, as we've seen volatility come down a bit here, do you think that kind of reverses the course here in terms of companies maybe choosing to go that route over the traditional IPO route?
Well, I think companies, when they're, you don't make these decisions overnight. If you're going to go think about an IPO path, a lot of things you'd have to do to be IPO ready would make you attractive to a SPAC as well, acquirer. So if you're going to take that 12 months to prepare for an IPO, do all the things from an accounting perspective, et cetera, that's a lot of work. So we are starting to see the IPO market open up. You're going to have a very busy June, and we're certainly hopeful that continues.
Yeah, so let me just follow up on that, because it sounds like the pipeline has been pretty robust at a time when you think a lot of companies are maybe second guessing. Going into the second half of the year, do you expect that to continue? I mean, what are the conversations you're having with companies?
Yeah, we're obviously hopeful. I think this next week or so, you're going to see some very large names come to market. Those were companies that were very far along the path in the March timeframe, and have just picked up that work. And now that the market has stabilized, we're seeing them prepare themselves to go public. We've also had obviously a lot of biotechs go public because they don't have to really predict the next couple of quarters as much as say a technology company or retail company. So what you're going to start seeing is now another batch of companies, if they can start the process of going public, and that happens in June, July, August, we think it could be a pretty robust time frame here, because they really would like to get out before the election comes in November. So again, I with a stable market, with the ability to do these meetings online and prepare for an IPO, I think there's a big pipeline for sure.
Okay, Nelson Griggs, president of the Nasdaq Stock Exchange. Good to have you on today.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.